All right, stay with me here, because what I'm about to walk you through is not theory, not speculation, and not propaganda. This is the part where reality becomes more complicated and far more uncomfortable than the labels we've been using for decades. If you live in the West, there is one word that has shaped your entire understanding of China. It is a Cold War word, a Soviet word, a word that instantly paints a picture of gray bureaucrats, rigid ideology, stagnation, and political decay. That word is communist. We talk about the Chinese Communist Party. We talk about communist China. And because language shapes perception, we assume we already know the ending to the story. We assume that because the Soviet Union collapsed, China must eventually collapse the same way. We assume that a system run by a communist party must be ideologically rigid and incapable of long-term innovation. But here is the uncomfortable truth, one that Washington, London, and Brussels still struggle to say out loud. The word communist explains almost nothing about how China actually functions in the 21st century. If you try to decode modern China using Marx or Lenin, you will be wrong. Every time. Because the engine driving the Chinese state today isn't communism. It's civilization, a 2,000-year-old governance tradition that predates the West's entire political vocabulary. Many Asian observers put it plainly. China today is shaped far more by ancient cultural principles than by imported ideology. So if it's not communism, what actually runs China? During my years as a diplomat and later as dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, I taught a framework that explains the success of several Asian governments. A formula so simple you can write it on a napkin. M, meritocracy. P, pragmatism. H, honesty, performance legitimacy. Singapore used this formula as its backbone. China studied it, adapted it, and scaled it across 1 billion people. To understand the challenge China poses to the West, you must stop looking for ideology and start looking for the MPH formula. Because China is not run by revolutionaries. It is run by something far more formidable, a disciplined, competitive, technocratic political machine. And today, we're going to break down how it actually works. M, meritocracy in the West. Legitimacy comes from one source, an election. If you can raise money and win votes, you can govern, whether or not you've ever managed anything larger than a campaign office. China operates on a different principle. Competence itself is political legitimacy. Officials don't rise by giving speeches. They rise by running successfully a village, a city, a province, sometimes the size of a European state. By the time a Chinese official reaches Beijing's top ranks, they've often managed tens of millions of people, handled natural disasters, industrial transitions, and social crises. Compare that to the United States. Obama jumped from state senator to president in 4 years. Trump had never held public office before the White House. This isn't a moral judgment, just a structural reality. The Chinese system is built to produce administrators. The Western system is built to produce politicians. And over decades, China's administrators have become more educated, more technocratic, and more globally aware. This isn't the Soviet model, where loyalty outrank competence. This is something else entirely. A state that expects its leaders to actually know so. If meritocracy explains who rises inside the system, the second pillar explains how China governs. P, pragmatism. This is where Western analysis often collapses under its own assumptions. Many in Washington still believe China is run by ideology, rigid, doctrinaire, Marxist doctrine. But if you study China's actual policy behavior, not the label, you find something entirely different. China may be the most pragmatically governed major power on earth. Look at Deng Xiaoping. In 1978, he surveyed a country broken by the Cultural Revolution, poverty, disarray, stagnation. He then looked abroad, including at Singapore, a small capitalist city-state. He didn't reject it as bourgeois. He didn't call it imperialist. He asked one question: how do we copy what works? That is Chinese pragmatism in one sentence. If the cat catches mice, it doesn't matter if it's black or white. And this is a defining difference between China and the old Soviet Union. The USSR was a prisoner of ideology. China is a student of results. When centralized planning failed, China opened markets. When it needed technology, It brought in foreign investment. When pollution threatened stability, it pivoted to the largest renewable energy expansion in human history, not because of ideology, because of national survival. This same pragmatism shapes China's foreign policy. Unlike the Soviet Union, China does not demand ideological conversion from its partners. No Moscow-style revolutions. No exporting communism. Instead, China asks, do you need a port, a highway, a loan, a power plant? The West brings political sermons. China brings a construction contract. And in much of the global South, that difference matters. H, honesty, performance legitimacy. Now, let's address the most controversial word in the MPH formula, not honesty as in no corruption. China clearly struggles with corruption. This honesty refers to something deeper, structural, the honesty of a government that must deliver results or lose its legitimacy. In the West, political legitimacy is granted by the process. If you win an election, you're legitimate. Even if you fail to govern effectively, China does not have this luxury. Because there are no national elections, the system must earn its legitimacy continuously, through rising incomes, through stability, through infrastructure, through visible progress. This is what political scholars call performance legitimacy. If the government fails, the public interprets it as losing the mandate of heaven, an ancient Chinese political concept. This is why Xi Jinping launched the largest anti-corruption campaign in modern history. Not performative, not symbolic, existential. Corruption threatened the party's survival. He had to purge it or lose the country. The data of the West doesn't want to look at while America's bottom 50% has seen decades of wage stagnation. China's bottom 50% experienced the fastest rise in living standards in human history. 800 million people lifted out of poverty. A middle class exploding past 400 million. Massive infrastructure expansion, broad access to education, and healthcare. This is why trust surveys consistently show Chinese citizens reporting 80 to 90% confidence in their government. Numbers the West find impossible and therefore dismisses. But here's the reality. 134 million Chinese traveled abroad in 2019. They saw New York, Paris, London. They compared. And they went home. That is not brainwashing. That is assessment. Why the MPH formula matters, because it reframes the competition of the 21st century. The West insists this is a moral battle. Democracy versus autocracy. But on the ground, for billions of people around the world, the question looks very different. Which system delivers? Which system solves problems? Which system improves people's lives? The United States today faces polarization, gridlock, declining infrastructure, and diminishing trust. China faces its own challenges, aging demographics, debt pressures, environmental constraints, but possesses something the West has lost, a governing machine still capable of long-term planning and coherent execution.